Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments on my videos from last week, so let's get to it. This first is an email that was sent via our website. Anonymous upper tier patron wrote, during your 90-day fiancé reaction of Brandon and Julia, you mentioned that Brandon seems to display a blank self, comparing him to a ghost. I very much identify with this ghost self. In my current relationships, it is difficult to form my own opinion and stand up for myself, as I tend to be a people pleaser. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, and I'm wondering if this is a common symptom of complex PTSD. End of email. Yes, absolutely. When you suffer from complex PTSD, it is the result of complex trauma, which is ongoing relational trauma or trauma from a family member, usually someone that's supposed to actually be taking care of you. And usually what this means is that during your early years, you were at least somewhat denied the ability to develop a connection with your needs and your emotions. And so even if you had the ability to express yourself, you wouldn't really know what to express because you haven't been given a chance to connect with your needs and your emotions. Also, when you're traumatized and terrorized and scared half to death all the time as a child, then you're scared of asserting your needs. You just learn it's just better to not assert your needs. And so even if you were in connection with your needs, as you feel the need to express it, it stops because you learned early in life that that was a bad thing. Brandon and Julia videos, comments on Brandon and Julia. Let's get into that on YouTube. Sam says, I would never make a guest that I barely know take care of my animals, ever. Farm work is no joke. So a lot of people in the comment section were saying that it's ridiculous that the family was asking Julia to do the farm work. German says, I would sleep until noon too if I just arrived from another country, spent the first day following a sightseeing schedule, and got grilled about birth control from my fiance's mom. So, and as a non-morning person, as a night owl myself, I can relate. German as well. Leah says, I live in a farm community, and the behavior from this family is very odd. It would be 100% normal to expect her to work as a new member of the household, but it feels cruel to not express the expectations and shaming her for not intuiting that animals must get fed at the butt crack of dawn. More videos here, more comments on Brandon and Julia. Makeup says, I don't get the vibe Julia is looking for a green card. Also, May 9th wasn't even Mother's Day in 2020. It was the day after. Mother's Day was the day, or May 9th, anyway. It was not the actual Mother's Day. I also think the parents were very offended that they didn't consult them before picking the date. Yeah, I think that that could definitely be a possibility, that it wasn't just that it was Mother's Day, that, you know, the mother clearly had a problem with that, but that it was sprung on them and they thought they were going to be consulted and involved in the decision-making process, and so emotionally that was very hard for them. Sister on YouTube says, it's not even Mother's Day. It's the Saturday on the weekend where Mother's Day is the Sunday. Cry laughy face. Melissa says, my ex and I got married on Mother's Day. We had our caterer put together gift baskets for all the moms and grandmas and delivered them to their hotel rooms. It was delightful. Right. So that's what I thought when I was watching the video. I thought, oh, okay, they're getting married on Mother's Day. That's, you know, or near Mother's Day. That's kind of special. And then the mother just, you know, was not happy about that. My speculation is that this is the end result of a lifetime of difficulty for the mom, going way back before she even had kids, and that there's something about her relationship with her son that meets her emotional needs somehow, some sort of stability or some sort of entitlement, some sort of importance, hard to say. But that when we look at that behavior, at least for me, culturally speaking, I'm like, what in the world is going on here? And whenever we see that as a clinician, we don't judge that. We say there's probably something behind that. There usually is, if not always. And we just don't know what that is because the mom hasn't talked about her childhood. Sophie says, if one of my children decided to get married on Mother's Day, I would be thinking, what a wonderful day to spend the day. Right. Anastasia says, Brandon is unable to use his words to express his wants and needs, so he's done so indirectly. So let me read that again. Brandon is unable to use his words to express his wants and his needs, so he's done it indirectly. I see a lot of myself in Brandon, and I bet he secretly gets a kick out of pissing his mom off because he resents her control over him. Right, so that was one of the speculations I had. It seemed like that could be definitely a possibility, that Brandon actually purposefully scheduled it on the Mother's Day weekend and without consulting them prior, because he knew it was going to bother them, because he resents the mom for the amount of control that she has imparted on him over his lifetime. And instead of dealing with it directly, he has expressed his anger indirectly or passively. And when you're treated that way your whole life, you have a really hard time expressing your anger directly. In fact, we have a personality disorder named after that. Sam says, my husband grew up abused by his narcissistic mother. My husband cried when he watched this episode because he can see the dynamic that he grew up in. It's very touching, Sam. Yeah, I imagine this happens for a lot of people, and I sometimes wonder why people watch this show, or the various reasons why people watch this show. And I think this is one of the reasons, is that it helps us to see in stark, TV land what our childhood might have been like in some ways. There's a variety of different depictions that we see, and for many of us, we've grown up with mothers like this. I didn't, but other people have. And when we see this, it helps us to heal on some level. The crying that your husband cried while he watched this show, I don't know, but I would guess that that was healing in some way. To see it and to grieve it and to know it and to say, oh, because it's clear that it's not Brandon's fault. When you watch that episode, at least for me, it doesn't look like it's Brandon's fault. I mean, you could blame him for not involving the parents, but a lot of young adults, 27-year-olds, don't necessarily involve their parents in the decision making. I would say in my neck of the woods, 90% of 27-year-olds do not tell the parents about the date that it's going to be prior. Anyway, the point is that we could look at that situation and see that Brandon didn't do anything horrible. And you see the mom's reaction and the dad's reaction, and you see the amount of emotional control that they kicked into. And if you're watching as just an innocent bystander, then you're like, whoa, that's what my parents were like. And it's clearly not Brandon's fault. It's clearly the parents' fault. There's something different about them, something wrong with them. Does that mean that I can release myself from the blame that I did to myself and that everyone did to me about my dynamic with my mom, that I had in my childhood? That could be a powerful experience, right? That to see it and to say that I now can see that it probably wasn't my fault when I was growing up. Anyway, I'm guessing that's why people watch the show. Let me know in the comments if you've had some of those moments, because if you do, I really hope you have, because you deserve that. Jovi and Yara videos from last week. AT says, quote, people don't pee in the streets of New Orleans. Remember when Jovi said that people don't pee in the streets of New Orleans? And AT says, I almost spit my coffee out. Like, I get that you live there, but have you ever actually been to New Orleans, Jovi? Pissing in the streets is pretty normal there. Yeah, well, so in my experience, and it's limited, urinating in the streets on Bourbon Street, particularly at night when everyone is drinking, which is almost all year round, not just on Mardi Gras, that is fairly common. But New Orleans is a big city, and even just right out, even the French Quarter is pretty big. And so there's a lot of areas in New Orleans where you would expect there to be a normal amount of urination, given it's an American city. I used to live downtown Seattle, and in my alleyway, well, I'll just stop there. Let's just, I won't bother you with the details. Yulia says, I don't know anyone who wears their shoes in the house. I don't know anybody who wears their shoes in the house. I guess I have a shoeless circle of friends. Okay, so Yulia is saying that everyone they know takes their shoes off before they go in the house. Yeah. I don't know the stats, but in my neck of the woods, I would put it at, for Asian Americans, I would say 80 to 90% take their shoes off For white Americans, I would say, I don't know, 50-50 maybe? I don't know. It says, here in Louisiana, we leave our shoes in the mudroom. Shoes are the dirtiest things. We keep our floors and carpets clean that way. Yeah. Molly says, seeing her scene in this moment, so when Yara broke down crying about feeling rejected and abandoned and hurt when she was in a foreign country going through a miscarriage and a surgery, Molly says, seeing her scene in this moment explains her entire mannerisms throughout the show. She's heartbroken, grieving, hurt, and angry. Losing a baby and then being abandoned changes everything. Yeah. And I always like it. I mean, it's sad for me to watch people suffer, but it is helpful for us to learn that about these individuals, because that usually is what's driving these things. For everyone on this show, if we could learn their traumas, it would help us to understand them. Everyone you've ever hated on this show, or any reality TV show for that matter, in all likelihood, they have a Yara story in them, if not thousands. So Thin says, watching this scene made me understand Yara better. Jovi, on the other hand, is still a douche. Okay. Stephanie and Ryan. Hope says, when you mentioned her not having kids, and by doing this, she is getting her needs met, I can definitely see that. Right. So Stephanie and Ryan, new couple, 90 Day Fiancé, and we saw that she was seemingly cultivating a mother-son relationship with Ryan, who is an adult. So a romantic relationship with a man, but they have a mother-son sort of dynamic. So Hope is saying, when you mentioned her not having kids, and by doing this, she is getting her needs met, what I was saying was, and it's total speculation, and this would be a common thing that people would say as a prejudice, so I don't want to play into that, but it's one of the possibilities. Okay, going on to Stephanie and Ryan. Stephanie and Ryan, remember, they're the new couple on 90 Day Fiancé. Stephanie is in her early 50s, I believe. Ryan is in his 20s. Ryan is in Belize, and it seems like they were developing a mother-son dynamic. Hope says, when you mentioned her not having kids, and by doing this, she is getting her needs met, I can definitely see that. Right, so what I was saying was it's a possibility that Stephanie, because she doesn't have kids, she has a need for, and all adults perhaps have this need regardless of gender, to take care of other people. And by having a spouse that you're taking care of, you can actually get your needs met in that way. I actually know a fair amount of therapists who are like this. My dog is barking. There's a fair amount of therapists who, prior to becoming a therapist, will look back on their romantic relationships and realize that a lot of their relationships they chose because they could actually take care of someone. They had a very caring nature, a very empathetic or desire to help people. And we can get a lot of our needs met in our romantic relationships, including that one. And then once they became a therapist, they no longer needed to date people who they were taking care of. So a lot of people have that need. It's a wonderful need. It's what probably keeps our species going, right? It compels having children, and it compels us to take care of kids and so on. It compels a lot of therapists to become therapists. Taking care of other people it meets a need in my life anyway. I have a tremendous need to help other people, and I get a lot of needs met by meeting other people's needs. And so if you feel needed, you feel fulfilled, you feel better about yourself, all that kinds of things. And so Stephanie might have that need inside of her, and she might be with him because she wants to get that need met. Who knows? But I want to recognize this is kind of a stereotype for women who are older dating younger people that, they must want a son. It's certainly not always the case by any means, but it's a possibility that we don't have any data for, but perhaps we can keep an eye on it. Maria says, total speculation, but based on friends I have in other parts of the world where the economy heavily relies on tourism, there might not be any jobs available in Belize during COVID. Yeah, I didn't think about this either, and it's something that we all need to consider. We heard that Stephanie is funding Ryan's job. And from a particular perspective, you'd be like, whoa, what? This woman is paying a friend to employ her fiancé, her boyfriend, and all that sort of feels funny. And one of the realities to consider is that in Belize, it might be heavily reliant on tourism, and given COVID, there's not much tourism going on. And so it might just be, just a matter of practical reality for this family. Who knows? We don't know much by this point. Kayla says, I don't have any children, and I am fairly successful. In the past, I have dated younger men, but by chance, not by choice. So let me chime in here on Kayla. When you are older, and past 35, and you're dating, depending on the circles you run in, there's a pretty wide range of people you're going to meet. You might meet 21-year-olds and not realize they're 21 until after you've had a couple of drinks and talked about things. Obviously on Tinder they list it, but if you just met anyway. Point is that when you're 40 years old, 50 years old, and you're just dating and you're meeting people, people tend to date a pretty wide range of individuals because they're looking for people who might be compatible with them. They might be looking for someone in their age range, but what if they meet someone who is outside of their age range that they might have a chance with, in terms of compatibility? You might give that a try. And so what Kayla is saying, I've dated younger men, but it's by chance, not really by choice, because when you meet a lot of people, sometimes you meet younger, sometimes older. Anyway, so that's what Kayla's saying. In those relationships, when I dated younger people, the scale was not balanced. I found that it didn't work for me because they would purposefully underfunction. I realized maybe I felt good helping them function because I thought I provided them with the emotional support they lacked in their own childhoods. So Kayla is talking about what I was talking about earlier in terms of getting multiple needs met through romantic relationships, which we all do. And Kayla's saying that I think I was actually trying to get that need met of helping another person by helping them function, which ended up not working in the end because I resented them for under-functioning, and they wanted me to take care of them because they knew I was older or might have chose me because I was older. Anyway, Mike and Natalie videos. Brittany says, interesting. When I saw this clip, and by the way, the Mike and Natalie videos that I'm posting are from the previous season that Mike and Natalie were on. I haven't caught up to posting the reaction videos to this episode for Mike and Natalie. Interesting. When I saw this clip of Mike and Natalie, I thought Natalie avoided the question of the producer. The question, do you love Mike? I thought the initial question was, do you love Mike? And her answer was a political answer. I can see why Mike would be closed off and hurt by her answer. I'm also a lot like Mike in that I shut down and can be cool when I express my feelings. Then I feel misunderstood by others later on. This video was very helpful in understanding myself, something to take back to therapy. All right, so Brittany is talking about how Natalie, when asked, do you love Mike, that to Brittany's eyes, Natalie gave a diplomatic answer and not a very caring answer. And then Mike was hurt by that. And then Mike shut down and was very cool and didn't express his feelings. And Brittany, the commenter here, can relate to that and is saying, it's interesting, that I have an insight watching Mike. I have an insight into my own attachment reactivity, and that's something to bring back to therapy. Good for you, Brittany. You're a smart, wise individual. Anastasia says, I can't read Natalie's mind, but being Russian myself, I grew up believing that if you said, I love you, it is final. And whatever Americans call love, Russians will call having feelings. Yeah, there are a lot of comments about this, and this is what I thought when I was watching the show. And thank you for confirming this for some of you who are familiar with this culture, that when they were asking Natalie, do you love Mike? To Mike, and frankly, many Americans probably, the threshold of saying I love you, or the threshold of saying I'm in love with someone or I love someone, in terms of the word love, it's lower. We all have a spectrum of feeling, right? Where it's just like, ooh, I think I like this person. Ooh, maybe this could grow into love. Ooh, I think I'm really into this person. Ooh, I have lots of feelings. I think I might want to spend the rest of my life with this person. Okay, so there's various steps on the ladder. In some cultures, the word love means rung, ladder rung two, or some people, some cultures, whatever. And other cultures, they might average a little higher on the ladder in order to say, I love you. And so what Anastasia is saying is that in Russia, they have this phrase that translates into having feelings, and a lot of Americans would actually call that love. And that's what I thought. I just thought Mike just has a lower threshold, because I didn't believe that Mike was like 100% sure of wanting to marry Natalie in that moment. They both seem to be a little wary and maybe hopeful. They both seem to be similar in their feelings for each other, honestly. In fact, Natalie seems to be a little bit more having feelings for Mike. And so they just have a different definition of love. And if a therapist was there to actually help them understand that, they perhaps wouldn't have been hurting each other in that moment. Donna says, this couple is so confusing to me. Yeah, I agree on some level. I feel like I understand because they seem to be very guarded. We saw, as I said in the video, I think, there are 3 different modes that they've been in. One mode was in the very beginning where there's much love, much affection, much hope, much joy. Then they had this middle zone where it was a lot of conflict. I mean, heavy conflict, lots of tears, lots of distress, total chaos, really. Remember when Natalie is in bed crying and Mom and Mike are there trying to console her, and everything just seemed completely off the rails. And then there's this third mode, which they go into about halfway or at the end of that first season, where they both kind of shut down, and they're both very careful, and they're standoffish, and they communicate that they're hurt and upset, but they don't give the other person a chance to help them. And I think they're doing that because they think it's better than the second phase, which was high conflict, which you could argue is true, but it doesn't, they're in a rut. And a lot of people in that stage will come into therapy, and sometimes what happens is in the first few sessions of couples therapy, they'll actually transition to that heavy conflict moment before they can get to the good place. Sarah says, I don't think any situation where throwing an engagement ring prompts a healthy conversation. Yeah. Kayla says, Mike and the mother communicated flawlessly without speaking the same language, but he can't seem to understand Natalie. Yeah, it was a very sweet moment between Mike and the mom. Amina says, tearing up over here seeing Mike hug Natalie's mom. Tearing up over here seeing Mike hug Natalie's mom and cry. I speak Russian, and Natalie's mom was so genuine and sweet to him. Yeah, it was a very sweet moment. Rara says, before I went to therapy, I was like Michael. I could never talk about how I was feeling. I couldn't even name it. It was distressing and frustrating. Yeah, most of us could use work of this sort in therapy, where we get to know our feelings, we know how to name it, and we know how to communicate it. I don't know a single human being who is even halfway good at this, including myself. We could all use work on that. And so what Rara is saying is, before I went to therapy, I was like Michael. I could never talk about how I was feeling. I didn't even know a name for it. And when you're abused or neglected and mistreated to some degree growing up, you might have a really hard time knowing your feelings, naming your feelings. A lot of what I do when I'm working with my trainees is helping them to go very slow, because there's this assumption that a lot of therapists will make that clients know how to name feelings. They know that when you ask a question like, how'd that make you feel, or how do you feel right now? There's this assumption that people know how to do that, and not everyone knows how to do that. And it might seem like childish work in therapy, but it's not. It's very common. In fact, when I talk with trainees, my students, sometimes I have to spend time working with them on how to talk about their emotions, particularly how to identify your physical reaction. The sort of top-notch ability to analyze your emotions is awareness of your body, particularly your torso, when you're having an emotional experience. A lot of times when you ask someone how they feel, they will say the thoughts that are in their prefrontal cortex. So they'll come to me and they'll be like, yeah, I was in a fight last night. I'd be like, okay, when you were going through that, how'd that make you feel? I'll be like, well, I kind of felt like my spouse was unfair and being a jerk face. Okay, so it's not a feeling, it's a thought, but we're getting there. It's the top layer of the onion, so let's work our way down. I'll be like, okay, so tell me about what happened in the moment. Well, in the moment, my spouse was saying that I never listened to her, and I said, okay, well, when she said that, how did it make you feel? How did you feel? And I'm thinking physical hurt or something. And he'll say, oh, well, I kind of felt like, she was just in a bad mood. I felt like she just didn't know what she was talking about. Okay, again, it's not feelings. It's a way of talking about your hunch or something. I kind of feel like, okay. I'm like, okay, but when she said that, when she said, you never listened to me, what was your first emotional reaction? Sometimes I'll even, gesture to my chest, and because that's usually where our emotions start. And say, well, I don't know. I guess it, just bothered me. Okay, so bothered me is getting closer to the core emotion. The core emotions, and we could debate, and there's a lot of debate in psychology as to what we would call like the central emotions. But usually, when you're in a relationship with someone and they accuse you of something, like you never listened to me, usually it hurts us. It might even make us afraid that the other person is going to leave us. But at the very least, it hurts because we feel like we try to listen and we feel like we do listen. But when someone says you never listen, especially when it's never listen, it's like, ouch, that hurts my feelings. That's natural, right? But so many of us have been shamed for, expressing those feelings or thinking about those feelings that we are in complete denial, or even if we notice them, we don't want to express them because that makes us weak or something, or sensitive. So then I would hope to get there. Sometimes that takes 5 years, by the way. I'll work with a client for 5 years before they can say, yes, I was hurt in a situation like that, given their relational traumas when they were growing up. People with complex PTSD, that sort of thing. Anyway. So eventually they say, okay, when my wife said I never listened to her, it hurt my feelings. It was painful. It made me sad. It also kind of made me afraid that she was going to leave me, which I really don't want. If she believes that, she's probably going to leave me, and that really scares me. Okay. Then I say, where did that emotion start from in your body? What did that feel like? And that could take another 5 years. No joke. Even with highly secure people who grow up in, well-functioning families will have a hard time getting to this level. And so I challenge you to think about this if you're in therapy, because this can actually trigger trauma. So you want to make sure that you take care of yourself during that process. But I would eventually want to get at, okay, so you're hurt and sad. Again, we're 6 years into therapy by this point with some people. How do you feel in your body? And it's like, well, it felt like a punch in the gut, and I felt tightness in my chest, or whatever it is that someone says. Usually it's torso related. And that's when I know, once they can tell me that, we have arrived at true emotional awareness, at least in that moment. And then we double down on that a bunch of times so they get used to considering that in the moment. Once you can really feel that, because that's where emotion starts, we have input of stimulation of some kind. We observe some perception. We see something. Wife said the following sentence, registers in the brain. That's the stimulus. The body there's a little bit of interpretation there in terms of trying to figure out what does that sentence mean exactly, and some associations. And then boom, emotional reaction in the body. Can be in the shoulders, can be in the hands, sweaty hands, can be all over body. Fight, flight, freeze, appease, faint, tingling, numbness, hand sweating, tightness, short breath, punch in the gut, pain, break heart, trying to back away. There's various different urges and feelings that you'll feel in your body. Then your brain registers how it feels in the body, and that's when you register the emotion. That's when you go, oh, I must be hurt. And then you layer that with like, well, I can't admit that to myself because I've been shamed too much for hurt, so I'm going to transfer that into anger. And I can't even really express anger. I have to transfer that into hostility and defensiveness, and that's when I blast the other person, and then that hurts them. then they get a blast to their body, and then they, get hurt, and then they get angry, and then they can't feel that, so they get hostile, and they come back to you, and we're off on the systemic circular causality race. And that's when you go to couples therapy. Liz says, I just want to say I got myself one of the throw pillows from your shop that says take care of yourself because you deserve it. And I got to say, seeing that throw pillow every time I sit on my couch is a really nice reminder and legitimately uplifting. I hear your voice in my head encouraging me all the time now. That is great. So just a little history on that saying. In the beginning of my podcast 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago now, I always wanted to have kind of a sign off, but I never really knew what to say. And I would never sit down and say, okay, what am I going to say? It was always sort of on the fly. I'd be ending the episode and I would, in the beginning, I think I said, I'll see you next week, because it was a weekly podcast back then. But eventually I was like, I feel like I want to say something. And then just spontaneously, I said, take care. All right, everyone, take care. End. And then I thought, well, okay, I think I kind of like that. Take care. And then the next time, like, maybe a year later, it was something like, and everyone take care of yourself. And I thought, okay, that's nice. But then I thought, take care of yourself can have a lot of different meanings. It could mean what I'm trying to get across, but it could also mean take care of yourself and stop depending on other people. Take care of yourself, be independent, get your crap in order. And I didn't want that to come across. So I was like, oh, what could I say? And then again, maybe a few years later after that, we're talking years and years. Eventually I was just like, and take care of yourself because you deserve it. And there was something about that, because I would say that to my clients a lot. I would say, you deserve validation. You deserve love. You deserve to be heard. You deserve space. You deserve to heal from your traumas. You deserve people who love you and are dedicated and loyal to you. You deserve love and warmth and empathy. You deserve people to spend the time to really pay attention, to apologize to you when something goes wrong. You deserve all those things, because it's obvious to me that we all deserve that. We all deserve that mutually together. We can all win when we all get that and give it. And it was such a powerful statement. And I think I was raised well enough to know that I did deserve those things for the most part. And when I would say that to clients, because it's something very much that I would say to a client, when I was trying to really convince them, because, you say to someone, that you can have this, and they'll be like, well, I don't deserve it. And then I would like, you deserve it. You definitely. And there was something about that intervention with clients that would really hit them. And I remember noticing that. A lot of my technique actually had to do with trial and error, and this was one of them. This isn't one of those things you really learn in graduate school. Make sure you tell people they deserve things. And I learned from clients that most of us are walking around in a state of feeling like we don't deserve anything. And we deserve so much. And to say we deserve something is somehow entitled. And okay, yeah, we're all entitled. We're entitled for humans to be human to us. We're entitled to the things that we give to other people. When we give grace to others, we deserve and are entitled to people giving grace to us. And so it popped in my head. I was like, okay, you take care of yourself because you deserve it. And then a few years after that, it was, you really, really do. And then sometimes I would want to iterate on it and say, take care of yourself and take care of others. Everyone wins when you take care of yourself, take care of others, because we all deserve it. We really, really do. So, that's 7 minutes you're not going to get back in which I describe something you might not be interested in. But there is merch about, on the Teespring, Psychology in Seattle, and you can buy a throw pillow, which I didn't realize that my wife designed. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. It kind of makes me want to throw a pillow that says it. Maybe I did know. Maybe people will post pictures of themselves with merch on Instagram and tag us, and so I like to see that. Anyway, But Liz, you do deserve it. Oh, and then years after that, I put out the call. I was like, because different podcasts would have different names for their listeners. Like I listen to TBTL, and they call their listeners tens, because early on in the run, they were like, we have tens of listeners, kind of making fun of the fact they don't have a lot of listeners. And so the listeners call themselves tens anyway. And so every podcast has their own little thing, like the murder podcast. They call themselves something. But anyway, I put out the call. I was like, what do we call? And I thought, Psychology in Seattle, PIS, Psychology in Seattle. What about pissers, PISers, pissers? And, people shut that down right away for good reasons. And then someone emailed in, and if it was you, please let me know, because I was looking through my email trying to figure out who this was, and I couldn't find it. But someone suggested deserving listener, and I instantly thought, yes, that is an awesome name. And so ever since then, I've been calling y'all deserving listeners. So some deserving listener named y'all deserving listener. Mel says, so we're back to Mike and Natalie. Mel says, when my kids have to leave to go to their dad's, I get super anxious and pick fights with my boyfriend over the dumbest things just so I can be mad instead of sad. Right. So in this episode, Mike and Natalie were preparing for Mike to go back to the States. And I was speculating, I didn't have any data, but it seemed possible that as they were heading towards that transition, the anxiety and the sadness of leaving each other and the worries of, this might be the last time they see each other, because what if they break up later, caused them to turn on each other in that moment. And Mel is saying, when my kids have to leave to go to their dad's, I get super anxious and pick fights with my boyfriend over the dumbest things just so I can be mad instead of sad. Remember earlier how I said, we'll have that feeling of sadness or hurt, which originates usually in the torso. We register that as sadness. But we get mad because we are shamed so often for being sad or hurt or afraid. Some reason anger and being mad is somehow more acceptable. I don't understand that, but it is. Mel says, we've talked about this, me and my boyfriend, we talked about this, and I make an effort to keep tuned in to my feelings. When I'm having an especially hard time, my boyfriend will give me extra love and try to help me relax. Well, Mel, it sounds like you and your boyfriend have a fantastic, open, emotionally aware and healthy relationship. That is just, you don't need a therapist. You're doing great. Well, I don't know that. I'm just joking. Who knows? But that's great. Zulala says, crying made my ex want to... So I was in this other episode, talking about how we all need to allow ourselves to cry and that crying is healthy. Zulala says, crying made my ex want to say I need better self-control and that only babies cry. But I will not stop crying just to make others feel comfortable. Good. It took years for me to be able to cry when I'm sad, and I'm not stopping. Good for you, Zulala. When you want to cry and when you need to cry, you cry, because it is as natural as laughing or getting thirsty or going to the bathroom. It is a human thing. I am 100% sure that if we took a time machine and went back to the beginning of our species, people would be crying on a daily basis because there's a lot of things to cry about. Lindsay says, the 7-minute mark hit me like a wall of bricks. I've struggled since I was 6. Yet when I told my family and friends, they reacted in a way similar to Mike and didn't seem to care. It really hurts. But I realize I need therapy, and thank you for reminding me that every day at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time that I deserve to take care of myself. So I read that kind of in a jankily way, but Lindsay is saying that they struggle, and I'm sorry, Lindsay, but that you realize you need therapy, and that's great, Lindsay, so get the therapy you need. And Lindsay is making a joke that every day at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I remind y'all that you deserve to take care of yourself and maybe that you need to go to therapy. My wife, Stacy, schedules all the episodes, and she schedules them at 10 o'clock in the morning, Pacific time, which, depending on where you're at, might be a different time. Lavender says, yeah, my family discouraged displaying any vulnerability. If you show any weakness, you will be targeted. It took a while to shake that mindset. Yeah. In some families, in some communities, when you demonstrate quote unquote weakness, you might get targeted, which is very unfortunate. Jella says, I will say, as someone who is terrified to go to therapy, hearing Kirk advocate for it for half a year always helps me consider it more. If this man actually makes me go and also makes me look for a therapist I actually feel comfortable with, he deserves an award. Well, yeah, Jella, if you actually find a therapist, I do deserve an award. Not anything substantial, but we'll share the award. How about that? We will both rejoice in your steps towards a happier life, more fulfilling life. My attachment, which is an audio-only episode, Ruby says, this is the first time I'm going to become a patron. So I'm actually going, on the fan page, the Facebook fan page, Psychology in Seattle, I asked asked Colin, who works for the podcast, to ask all the fans on the fan page. I don't run the fan page, but fans do. But anyway, but Colin, an employee of Psychology in Seattle, asked the fans, hey, what would you like us to rerun? Because usually we have reruns on the weekends. Because again, we've been doing the podcast for 12 years. We got a whole backlog. We have over 1,000 episodes, and some of them are worthy of rerunning. And so I hadn't been rerunning episodes in a while, and so Colin asked the patron or the fans, and they said, hey, do the attachment series deep dive, which came out a couple years ago. And so I'm going to rerun that every Saturday for the next few Saturdays, or I don't know, maybe 6 Saturdays, because it's 17 hours long. The deep dive on attachment theory was 17 hours long. Attachment theory has changed my life, changed everything about how I live my life day to day, changed everything about my treatment of my clients, changed everything about how I see things, how I see politics, how I see my family members, how I see myself, how I see my clients, the way I work with my students and supervisees. Everything hinges around attachment theory for me. It's not the only theory that I adhere to by any means, but it is a powerful, powerful theory, and often it is taught in a very simplistic way that does not it only scratches the surface in terms of its power. It's very powerful. And when I teach it to other people, including podcast listeners, they agree. And so when asked, you gotta rerun the attachment series deep dive. And so that's what we're going to do. So I posted the first chapter out of 6 chapters last Saturday, and Ruby says, and it's only available for patrons. So I'm sorry if you're not a patron, but you have to become a patron. Ruby says, this is the first time I'm going to become a patron. Dr. Kirk's video at the beginning of the year, I realized I was avoidant attachment. I've been working on this for the past year, but it's slow going. Yeah, working on attachment or insecurity can take years, if not a lifetime. Nikki says, attachment theory has actually changed my life. My attachment style was the root cause to so many of my bad habits and behaviors. It's helped me in so many areas of my life, helped me set boundaries and become a better, stronger person. I wish they taught this stuff in school. Yeah, I really wish, Nikki, the same, that we teach a lot of things in school. We teach the language, in the United States, we teach English language, literature, history, physics, chemistry, biology, math, social sciences, what am I leaving out? Physical education. When I was in high school, we literally took classes on how to cook and how to balance a checkbook. I guess important things. But attachment theory, communication, that you matter, self-esteem, psychology, aren't these things worth also having some dedication? And I'm not talking like 1 week in health class. I'm talking about every year, a full hour. You teach it to first graders in a first grade way, age appropriate. You teach it to 12th graders in a 12th grade age appropriate way. Think of all the wonderful things that could happen from that. In all likelihood, and they've done studies along these lines, you would see lower rates of substance use. You would see lower rates of teenage pregnancy. You would see lower rates of domestic violence, crime, children, mistreating your own children. When you understand your attachment, you are likely to improve your parenting of your own kids, especially if you understand your child's attachment, right? Better fulfilling life, less materialism, less narcissism, all sorts of things that are pretty much anything that is going wrong in society, I would guess, would at least see a little bit of reduction, if not a lot, if all Americans were taught attachment theory from first grade all the way through 12th grade. Just imagine an hour, and you made it exciting. You got like a really good professor or teacher who really made it interesting, and didn't make it boring or something. I just can't imagine what would happen. And because we live in a paternalistic, old school, shaming society, if you brought this up with people, they'd be like, yeah. Now, I know some of you are educators, and you'll email me and you'll say, actually, I do teach my kids about attachment theory. And God bless you for doing that, but it is not as prevalent as it could be and as it should be, in my opinion. I also made an episode on pet grief, and I was going to read all the comments, but actually, as I was preparing, I actually started crying a lot. And so, although, as I've said before, I want to model crying is normal, but I'm not ready for that kind of pain right now. So I'm just going to name the names of the people that I mainly saw. Linda often comments about when we talk about pets. Jella, Jackie, Sarah, and there are others. But people saying their own stories of having to put their pets down, their cats, their dogs, and how much pain it feels and how it's just a terrible thing. And I appreciated those comments. I feel ya, I'm with ya, and you're clearly with me, and thanks a lot for that. What? Yeah. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself and enjoy your pets because you deserve it. You really, really do.